Welcome to Contemplatio. My name is Antti and I'm recording this in Helsinki, Finland. I had a pleasure of chatting with Martin Butler since I have been a huge fan of his videos for a long time now. He has a marvelously frank and sincere way of presenting core philosophical and psychological concepts relating to matters such as the human condition and consciousness. I hope you enjoyed the interview and thanks for watching. Hello Martin and welcome to the channel.
Hi, well, thank you for inviting me to talk. You've got a list of very good questions here, so let's get going, yeah?
Sure. How's your day been so far?
It was great until about 5 or 10 minutes ago, and then I heard a screeching car and there's been a car accident nearby, so that's life. That's life, isn't it?
These days you've abandoned the rat race for the most part, if I've understood correctly, and enjoy your life in Portugal. What can you tell me of your ventures in the world of capitalism and business before that?
What I can tell you is if you want to see true human behavior, then you need to experience business, because people are very honest about what they're after. They're after about money. They're after money, and they'll do almost anything to get it. And so you see all kinds of behavior, and it's a very good education on human nature. And as you know, I was involved with the Gurdjieff work for quite a long time. And the essence of the Fouth Way, Gurdjieff's way, is that you practice in the middle of life. And so the business world was a very good training ground, because you had all kinds of behavior, betrayal, theft, lying, you name it, it was there. And then you have to deal with that within yourself. So it's a very good training ground. I wasn't a particularly good business person, in truth. I was just lucky. But my business did well. I got out of it. And as you say, I now live in the south of Portugal.
Have you been interested in philosophy and the workings of the human mind from early on, or is this something that started to occupy your thoughts after you became an adult?
No, I gained an interest when I was about 15 years old. The first thing I started to look at, because, I'm a boomer. And so, it was the 60s, it was flower power and all that kind of thing. And so I got interested in yoga. And then a few years later, somebody introduced me to Gurdjieff, to the ideas of Gurdjieff. And I've tried various things, but Gurdjieff has been a main theme right throughout my life, in actual fact.
Having experienced the pros and cons of the Fouth Way, how would you describe it as a so-called self-development or a spiritual path, and would you recommend it to anyone?
If somebody wants a hard life, then yes, I'd recommend it to them. But you see, the essence of Gurdjieff's work is really quite straightforward. I mean, on his deathbed, he said, "I leave a right mess." And he did leave a mess. I was fortunate in that I got to know a lady called Rena Hans, who'd worked with Gurdjieff. And so I got nearer to the root of what was being said, or the message he was trying to communicate. And it's actually fairly simple. One of the things he emphasized was we need to meditate upon our death regularly. And I teach 3 or 4 methods of meditating upon our death, because, as he says, it's a way to destroy the ego. If you believe that you're going to die in however many years it is, and possibly become obliterated, then your ego doesn't really have much ground to stand on. So that was one of the central practices. He talks about it in Beelzebub's Tales. And the other thing is to, how can I put it, to learn to use life as material to work with. And those are the two things. Now, using life as material requires a very good understanding of life. What is it that drives us? What is it that we're after? And that's a fairly deep question in actual fact, but at a superficial level, we all want to survive. And we're all after the same thing, which Nietzsche might call power, the will to power. How does that manifest? How does that manifest in human beings? And you need to understand all that kind of thing. And Spinoza is very good at detailing all this because he talks about hatred, love, envy, pride, and so on in a very analytical kind of way. And you can get to understand why somebody would be envious. Well, they'd be envious because they want what you've got. So the understanding is very important because it's one thing to have somebody say someone is bragging to you, say they're boasting, and you start to feel a little bit uneasy with it, a little bit diminished, and you can put your attention on that feeling because the emotions are in the body, they're not anywhere else. You can put your attention on those sensations, but if you can also understand what's actually happening, which is that your power, your existence power, is being diminished by somebody else who's basically trying to dominate you through their boasting. If you can understand all that, then basically you can deal with these emotions and they don't get hold of you and you don't spend the next week hating that person or whatever. So this is a practice in life, and it produces what I suppose traditionally they might call non-identification with what is happening around you. And that was one of Rena's big things, that we might get to the stage where at the middle of us is like the center of a storm. There's a storm going on around you, but at the center of the storm, it's still. And this helps us in life a great deal.
Could the system of Gurdjieff be upgraded or updated to meet modern standards, if you will?
Right. I was involved with the Gurdjieff Society in London for, I think it was about 3 or 4 years. Might have been a bit longer than that, actually, but thereabouts. The Gurdjieff Society was initiated by Madame de Salzmann, who Gurdjieff nominated to carry on his work. She moved the whole thing in a very Zen direction. And in fact, I believe they worked alongside a Zen master to refine their methods, because Gurdjieff's methods, according to some of the people in the work, are basically not all that great. And so there's a long discussion here as well. So you separate out the practice. The practice is the kind of thing I've been talking about from the theory. And of course, in Ouspensky, you get this whole grand system of what Mr. Gurdjieff was saying. Very few people refer to that in reality. The people that I knew in the Gurdjieff work typically wouldn't refer to it. They might do now and then, but not very often. And as you may know, Mr. Ouspensky abandoned his system near the end of his life and basically said it doesn't work, and to all his followers, go do your own thing, which must have been quite devastating for them. So you need to really strip away all the superfluous stuff. I mean, there are hundreds of books, people writing about the Enneagram, people writing about the ray of creation, all kinds of stuff. Strip all that away and just learn how to learn from your experience in life. That's the essence of it. And know how to handle life. And also, very, very important, is meditate upon your death frequently.
For ages now, from Plato's allegory of the cave and the Buddhist concept of Maya to the movie Matrix, people have been fascinated about escaping the so called false reality of the senses and the ego to something greater and possibly more real. But this way of thinking has its obvious pitfalls. How much value do you think we should actually put to all this Gnostic kind of thinking?
Well, it does have a use. As you know, I studied Kant, and Kant has a similar kind of story, which is that we know the world that our mind represents to us, but we do not know the world as it is. So that's a useful realization because it's humbling. We are limited creatures, and the idea that we can somehow just plug into some fantastic reality that normally we don't know about is just fanciful. It's imagination. It's far more useful to realize our limitations and to really not go chasing after what is essentially imaginative scenarios. So, I mean, you can get into the psychology of all of this. Human beings have always wanted to transcend themselves, always. Going way, way back, prior to the Enlightenment, people were interested in magic. If they do this, that, or the other, then they can make some person ill, or if they do something else, they can attract wealth, or whatever. It's all kinds of magical incantations and so on. We've always been after that kind of thing. Why? Because we're power-hungry creatures. We want to be more. And we always seek out ways to try and be more. Now, if you want to see a magical incantation that we do these days, this might offend some of your viewers. If we see, I want to see the drinking of wine that represents the blood of Christ, to merge with Christ and to seek some kind of union with Jesus Christ. It's a kind of magical ritual. And we still create them. I don't know if you've heard of The Secret. This idea that if we think about something every day, we can make it happen. Again, it's another ritual. It's another attempt to be more powerful than we actually are. And this has gone throughout history. And you have to be very careful, because a lot of what passes for spiritual is really nothing more than an attempt to have some kind of magical ritual that makes us more powerful than we actually are.
The philosophers that you like to study and to quote or use as an example in your videos include, for example, Spinoza, Kant, and Schopenhauer. What do you think are the most important lessons we can learn from these mentioned thinkers?
Spinoza, I think everybody at school should be educated on part 3 of the ethics, because there he outlines the human situation very, very well. Actually, maybe parts 2 and 3. He outlines the human situation very well, and you can take away a lot of wisdom from all that. So, the basic thing that drives us is what he calls a conatus, which is the life drive. And from that, all kinds of behavior materialize. So, for example, love, which again in spiritual circles is given some elevated status, but love is literally the pleasure that we get from something. So if something gives you pleasure, we love it. So if you could unite with the Godhead, and it was some wonderful experience, you would love that, obviously. But he talks about love, and if something gives you pain, then you hate it. You wouldn't love the Godhead if it was just a source of pain. And so he talks about all these things, and you get a very deep understanding of what's driving us in many of our behaviors. As far as Kant is concerned, then the big message from Kant, as I've already said, is that we know the world as our mind represents it to us. We don't know the world as it is. And a contemporary writer on this, which you may have heard him mention before, is Donald Hoffman. He's a neuroscientist, and he's more or less saying the same thing. And then Schopenhauer. Well, Schopenhauer lays bare the Buddhist notion, really, of all is suffering. And you know, for most people, yeah, people get, you know, periods of pleasure. So what might be a pleasure be? It might be having a nice meal, or getting into a new relationship, or getting some money, or something like that. But the pleasures are relatively small. The pains are much, much bigger. Losing a loved one, financial distress, some crippling illness. So, well, as Gurdjieff said, the planet is a pain factory. And that is indeed what it is. And we need strength and understanding to be able to deal with that. So that's what you get from Schopenhauer. It's a fairly unabridged treatment of man's situation on this planet. I should add Nietzsche. I mean, I don't mention Nietzsche all that much, but Nietzsche is the man who strips away all the illusions. You know, he's the famously said, "God is dead, and we have killed him." So yeah, Nietzsche's one to look at, I think.
Which other philosophers or perhaps religious thinkers do you value?
I like Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, because he kind of calls it as it is. You know, his famous statement, "Heaven and earth are heartless, treating all things as straw dogs." And I also like U.G. Krishnamurti quite a lot. If you've seen U.G., you know, his famous statement is, "You will live in misery and you will die in misery. There is no escape." You know, the thing is it's a mistake to take these people literally, because when somebody says you will live in misery and you will die in misery, there's no escape, what are they doing? They're destroying all your gaining ideas, and gaining ideas are poison in this kind of thing. You know, so a gaining idea might be, if I sit and meditate for the next 10 years, I'll become enlightened. Or if I, you know, do whatever, if I worship this person or this deity for the next 10 years, I will become realized, or something, you know, the gaining ideas. The biggest gaining idea, of course, is the idea that we want to be happy. So if we do this, we'll be happy. And most gaining ideas are very primitive. Is if I do, so Mr. Gurdjieff had his own gaining idea, which was, if you do this work and blah, 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 you can develop an immortal soul, which unfortunately you see many people trying to pursue that. So I like the people who lay the thing out as it is and don't add any fancy embellishment to it.
What can you tell me of your fascination with surrealist artists such as Max Ernst and Hieronymus Bosch?
Yes, I have a sneaking suspicion that these people, so most of us, when we look at nature, we are attracted to the eye candy, and eye candy is always life affirming. So a rose in full bloom, you know, it's eye candy because it affirms life, something that is healthy and vigorous. We wouldn't particularly like to see a rose with all its petals that have dropped off or something like that. So we're always looking for the eye candy. And I think that these people, Bosch and Max Ernst, see beneath that a little bit, and that's what they show in their paintings. Now, Max Ernst particularly has some amazing pictures. I can't remember the name of it. It's his partner, I can't remember her name, Margarita or somebody, in the morning. And there's a picture of all kinds of plants and so on. But the plants are half animal as well. And so I think he's seeing something in, we look at nature and we think, oh, isn't it lovely? But for example, if you have a part of a forest or a wood that is filled with oak trees, say, and then a sapling starts to grow, which is maybe a birch tree. The oak trees will send their roots out to strangle the roots of the birch tree. So the survival game goes on, even in the level of the plants and so on. So I think Bosch and Max Ernst see through that. I think they see it, and that's why I'm fascinated by them.
Besides YouTube, what venues and channels do you prefer when distributing your thoughts, and what kind of projects do you have planned for the future?
Well, you may know, I kind of get enthusiastic, then I can't be bothered with it, and I did a channel initially called Corporeal Fantasy, which a lot of people seem to like, and then I deleted it because I thought, well, I'm probably not going to keep doing this. And then I thought, oh yes, I will keep doing it. And so I started another channel, which is one of my character traits, unfortunately. And so YouTube has been okay. My wife puts some of my stuff on TikTok. I don't use it, I hate it. But she puts stuff on TikTok. And some of the videos on there have had over 1 million views, which is quite surprising. But of course, the essence of what I do is represented on Patreon. And if someone is silly enough to follow me, the really rough stuff, then they get it on Patreon. I do warn people. In fact, on TikTok, I said, for people who are interested, I have a Patreon channel, but it's really unpleasant. I wouldn't recommend it for most people. So, most people don't go there. I've got nothing invested in this particularly. I'm an old guy. I'll probably be dead within 10 years. And I do this because, well, for two reasons. One is I had 3 teachers who gave me quite a lot, and I feel like I need to give some of it back. And the other one is there's a community of 150 people on Patreon, and there's a lot of chat and it's wonderful to have 150 people who are interested in someone telling them that life is suffering and they're going to die. So yeah, the Patreon's good. I enjoy the Patreon. If the Patreon ever died, I'd probably pack in, but that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much for this interview, Martin. And how does the rest of your day look like?
The rest of my day looks like reading Escape from Evil by oh God, what's his name? Ernest Becker. Absolutely brilliant book. I'd recommend it to everybody. There's a like a secret in all of this. Various people called it mirror work. And it's kind of like, well, oh God, what's his name? Can't remember his name. A theologian from the Middle Ages, Boehm, Jacob Boehm. And I probably haven't pronounced that right, but anyway, Jacob Boehm. And he said, If you want to get to heaven, you have to do it by going into hell. And that is the way it works. People think that they can go straight to heaven, but you cannot. You have to go into hell. And which hell? Your own private hell. And you have to understand it and know how to deal with it and be honest about it. Most people can't be honest about their own private hell. And so, they never really get anywhere.